The good part about pronouncing my name is that you get to clear your throat twice. Correct pronunciation is Jochem Schulenklopper. And Tijmen is called Tijmen de Gooier. So my co-author and I are architects from the Netherlands. We're employed at separate mid-sized consultancy firms in the finance, government, healthcare and industry sectors. And next to being an architect in customer projects, we also act as trainers and coaches within our firms and as coaches for architects in customer sites. And we both happen to have a special interest in communicating visually towards other people, including business stakeholders. And that is what inspired us to this talk. And we noticed that we as architects have a very big challenge in communicating about architecture to people that are not used to talking to us or are not used to talk and reason about architecture. Because the business stakeholders, as we concluded, just don't seem to get it, no matter how hard we try. And we thought, what is the reason behind it? And what can we do about it? That is even a more important thought. And to be honest, we have discovered the enemy, and it's not them, it's us. And I want to show you why. But first I will show you two examples from totally different domains in which communicating is very important because the stakes are very high. There could be a lot of money involved, or a life could be at risk. For example, the F-35 fighter jet, formerly known as the Joint Strike Fighter. And as part of the communication about F-35, the supplier communicates about that plane in different descriptions and different visualizations and different languages. For example, an image of a photo that is used to wow the politicians or focus the general public about this plane. A more technical specification is provided for a parts supplier or a manufacturer that needs to know how or where the problems, his solutions should fit in the total picture. But if you're an army official, the first two pictures are not much of your interest. You want to select which armor to glue under the wings of the plane. And as architects, we should know this, right? This is 4+1, this is views and viewpoints. And we know we should do this. But are we actually doing this? Say you are a person with a heart condition and you go to a hospital for diagnosis and possibly treatment. A hospital lab does not even care how your body looks like or how your heart looks like. They measure blood values, they measure your heart function, they compare those against normal values or normal patients. They write a report on the deviations and they send the report to the cardiologist. A different department in the lab, in the hospital, makes cardiac MRI images. One scan delivers a huge amount of all similar looking scans of that heart. But the radiologist selects the images that are, well, most telling and selects those images for the treating physician, the cardiologist, in his report. So out of the available information, each expert selects the best images about communicating something important and adapts that message towards the goals and the needs of the target audience. Okay, now look at ourselves. How are we communicating about architecture? We are communicating about architecture in UML, Archimate, BPMN, and all other kinds of technical-looking descriptions. And we are very good at communicating technical information to technically inclined people, like developers and architects. But these languages are definitely not fit for non-technical inclined people. People that also make important decisions about the architecture. So what should we do? Well, often we just include the UML and BPMN images in our presentations anyway, because we've used them before, they worked with our colleagues, so why not use them again? And then we need to explain all kinds of smaller details about our language. We need to say, for example, in a UML diagram, oh, that stick man figure, oh, that's an actor. It's a user of the application. No, it can also be a system that uses the application. It does not have to be a human person, although we draw a stick man. About Archimate, we tell things like, no, the service lives inside the application that is using other services, and it is used as a step in a business process. And what we are doing is we are explaining a language instead of explaining the architecture of the system. So what do we do? Let's first look at our responsibilities as an architect, focusing on the communication part, because that's what this talk is about. Let's focus on the things that really matter for a business stakeholder. And I will also show you some examples about communicating architecture to business stakeholders from our experience. First, let me get my glass of water. In 2008, Philippe Kruchten wrote a paper about effective architects. And he said architects should allocate their time in a 50-25-25 ratio across three main activities. He said 50% of the time should go to architecting, which is designing, prototyping, evaluating, assessing, describing the architecture in, well, some kind of formal languages. 25% of the time should be about getting input. So listening to business stakeholders, looking towards other architectures, watching business trends, watching IT trends, going to conferences like this. And 25% should go towards presenting information and assisting stakeholders in their work. We should note that he talked about effective architect teams. So if you're a little bit more introvert architect, then you might hope that you have a more extrovert architect in your team, so he can, well, do the communication on your behalf, as long as you cooperate. Communication on the left side, it can be in those formal languages that we described earlier. We are among friends, architects, talking to other architects, so we can UML and Archimate all the day that we want. We can make funny references to Douglas Adams and XKCD and meme generators. But on the right-hand side, we listen and talk to business stakeholders, and they are a different kind of person. We call them the business. And they wear suits and ties. They don't know what's funny about the number 42. Oh, well, you know, good. And the lesson is, if we are using the language on the left side of the picture to talk to people on the right side of the picture, we are not getting efficient communication. Shown here are some stakeholders of an architect and an architecture of a system, and each stakeholder uses different languages in their day-to-day work. They have different concerns, they have different needs, they have different goals. And each of them may be involved in making important architecture decisions about the system that you're building or maintaining. So what do you do when you want to communicate with them? Well, most of the time we ignore the languages differences, and we use the one that the architect is most familiar with. And that is what we have seen a couple of slides ago. And we think that is not a very effective communication strategy. It's also not very polite. Want als ik op dit moment zou overgaan in het Nederlands, dan zouden maar 3 mensen het kunnen horen wat ik zei. Another strategy to cope with this is that we try to learn the languages of the stakeholders around, and we need to become a polyglot in all those languages, which has some advantages, but it's also questionable whether their language and their concepts and their concerns will help you in communicating about architecture, because that language and their words are not made for communicating about architecture. And it could also be hard to learn their language, because learning a language requires exposure for a long time, and it's easier if you're a child. And we should also ask ourselves, what do the business stakeholders really like to talk about? And I'm telling you, a business stakeholder does not care much about applications and interfaces and connectors and data stores and layers. And we should ask ourselves which language that we now have addresses the concerns of stakeholders as shown before. Because I think that you all agree that these concerns are keeping a business stakeholder more awake than our concerns. So the third option is, in our experience, that we need to create such a language if you want to communicate effectively by business, with business stakeholders. And if the topic is important enough and, well, crucial enough, that is also our best option. And no, we're not trying to create a new language that covers all these concerns. We're co-creating a language to communicate about architecture with a specific set of stakeholders with a specific set of concerns. Our approach is depicted in this image, and it's about co-creating an architectural description. On the top side you see business stakeholders and an architecture description that's getting clearer and clearer along the way. The bottom area depicts our architect, that's the superhero in this story. He develops the architecture description and feeds intermediate versions of that description towards business stakeholders. He collects feedback regarding clarity or understanding or effectiveness about in the understanding of the architecture, and he incorporates that feedback into new versions of the architectural description. And along the way, the description increases in quality and understanding. So let me show you just as an example some projects that we've done in which we have used this approach. This is an IT landscape, and you'll see a cutout in the right corner of an insurance company. And you might question how much is this different than the boxes and the lines that we've seen before. Very much, because now the boxes and the lines and the size and the colors and the locations are loaded with business meaning. People in this company know why the large red box in the middle is in the middle of the picture. Because this IT application is the heart of their company, and it's also the language that they use about that application. That's the heart of the system, and it has the most data. And many organizations, if you listen carefully, are loaded with metaphors about their, well, business and day-to-day operations in their vocabulary, and we should use them. For example, the Dutch Tax Authority divides their domains into three. And each of these domains has a different color. And you can even see, if you receive a letter from the Dutch Tax Authority, on the color of the envelope you can see from which domain that letter is coming from. Well, Eelco confirms. Well, the lesson is we should use such internal metaphors in a company in describing the architecture to them. Another example. Typically, architects present an architecture as a collection of applications and connections, database and such, and those are not interesting for a business user. It is like you are trying to describe a company by showing the assets and the liabilities of that company, which is good for the yearly report, but it doesn't tell you how those assets are being used by whom, when, and where. So one of our, well, more successful ideas, if I say myself, is that we are showing the use of an IT landscape by plotting flows of information or business processes on top that IT landscape. And anyone who's ever seen a metro map interprets this correctly, because the metro lines bring data or process state from one application to the other. Same principle applied here. In the language of this company, data flowed upstream towards customer-facing web applications. And so what is more logical in the visualization to also show data flowing from the bottom to the top of the image. So you will notice that again I'm trying to listen to business language and using that business language into the descriptions of architecture. Another question, what's ahead of us? So we're happy in business. People may wonder what are opportunities or threats that are approaching us. And how should we react to those opportunities or threats? And how big would the estimated effort be to react to those? And a solution, not the solution, but a solution this particular customer liked was using the technology radar of ThoughtWorks, perhaps you know it, which we adapted to fit our domain. And anyone who's ever seen Top Gun or The Hunt for Red October knows how to interpret the radar. Something on the outer edge is far away, something close is close, and you need to react to that, otherwise you will have a problem. So we drew an empty radar and let business stakeholders and IT guys jointly communicate about what are the threats approaching us, how should we react to that, how big is the effort of reacting. And business and IT guys working together and communicating about architecture, what do you want more? One of the things that we're currently experimenting is using business metrics to determine the size of an application in a landscape visualization. So according to volume of data, an application might look like this. You see a couple of applications. There's one big application because it has, according to this metric, the most data. But if you're interested in allocation of budget, the same landscape might be visualized completely different. So the colors remain the same, the location similarly, but the application area is a little bit bigger. And you could be interested in number of users or number of availability incidents. The colors and the position remain stable, but the picture tells another story. And it also allows business people to interpret and analyze the landscape, which they could not done before. So they might think like, that application in the middle of the landscape, that has the lowest availability. Why is that? Or the application serving the most users is not getting the most budget. Is that okay? Or the good thing, the application storing the most data has the highest availability. Unfortunately, the only pathway to that data is by that big application that has the lowest availability. You will see people, business people reacting, talking about architecture, aided by such images. In our experiment, the images are not static, so we have a dashboard. A business stakeholder selects a different metric, and the application landscape dynamically grows or shrinks according to the values of those metrics. So where does this all lead to? We want to make a humble addition to the body of knowledge about documenting software architecture. And we want to use business stakeholders' viewpoints, IT architecture obviously, but also psychology in order to communicate about architecture to business stakeholders. Okay, question, also referring to the psychology part. Based on our experience in consultancy projects, we started to write down lessons that we learned along the way. And last year we developed a course about communicating architecture to non-architects. And our first observation is that many architects were sleeping when the lesson was about psychology or visual design. So let's correct that in a 5-minute crash course. Our eyes and brains are wired to perceive specific attributes of an object without any effort, extremely fast and parallel. And those are called pre-attentive. That is called pre-attentive visual processing of objects. And I should not even have to point out which objects of the 9 is different in each set. Right? And the lesson is we should use these principles to put focus on things that are worth putting focus on, or are worth paying attention to. Let's use this as an example. How many 8s do you see? I'll take another sip of water. Okay, it's about 4. Hard, is it? Let's make that one a little bit easier. How many 5s do you see? Actually, it's 4 as well, because you missed one in the 3rd row, one that I didn't mark. Sorry about that. But other than that, did you notice how easy it was to spot the remaining 3? And we should use this principle to focus attention on. In the 1920s, German psychologists developed rules about visual perception, and that people tend to organize things as belonging together when you apply certain principles. The theory is called Gestalt theory, and the groups, Gestalt in the German language, are perceived as a new unit. And you can see some of these principles applied here. And the lesson is that Gestalt principles should be used to relate objects to each other. Oh, they also learned that humans tend to see a human face if you put a random blob of ink. And if in examples we've shown before, you could also see that these principles were put into practice by grouping applications, by putting them in containers, by showing similarity, by sharing the same color, and by depicting information on the same background. So gestalts are everywhere if you look. In Archimate, there's no formal connotation about using color. You can use colors, says Archimate, to put attention to some things, but other than that, you're not getting any help. UML diagrams are normally in grayscale, so black, white, and gray. And there's some ill-known and fake prescription about using 4 colors in the UML diagrams. And the main inspiration for those 4 colors were the colors that 3M used for their post-it notes. There is no connection about color and something in the real world. So we have got 2 well-known architectural languages that bypass the complete meaning of color and the message that a color conveys. And for a manager, a red application should be a bigger concern than a green application. Perhaps not for you and me, but for the manager it surely does. Question. If you are going to make an architectural description and you're using images, which one would get the message across quicker? Words or images? Case closed. Well, images might seem childish. Perhaps that's your reaction at this moment. But we're talking about communicative effect. And the effectiveness of pictures beats words in many ways. It's not that we're great visual designers and that we just want to show off our brilliance. But an eye for design is an acquired skill, next to perhaps a born given talent. But there are some excellent books available that can teach you about design, and you can apply that in your architectural descriptions almost immediately. Sketching. Do you need a diagram or a model? The first thing that we do is open Visio or PowerPoint, and we start using the perfect rectangles and perfect circles to, well, describe our picture. But how do you picture a business with squares and rectangles? How do you picture a sad customer? How do you picture a threat to the application's availability if you only have a circle? Are we dare to draw a picture, or we dare to sketch with when we're among colleagues? But what we don't do is scan the image and put that into our architectural description. Why is that? Why should we not use the sketch? Because sketching is a very important skill in delivering an end result, but also because the process of sketching helps in building the communication and building the understanding of the participants in the sketch. So we often instruct colleagues and customers to sketch the message instead of using words. So I know what you're thinking. So now it's our time to have these concerns, because if I apply the principles that you've just shown, then we as architects have some concerns. And people, every time I can predict the six questions that you are going to tell. The first one is, your architecture description is not generated from the repository. Or, well, the maintainability of the visualizations is poor. Well, Visio, really? The visualization is not complete, it lacks detail, the semantics are vague or ambiguous, and it's costly to create a language each time that you need to communicate about something. And you're completely right on all points. But nevertheless, we tend to accept these drawbacks because something is more valuable. That's business stakeholders and architects communicating about IT right on time. So, what should you take home of this talk? Well, it's a very simple call to action, actually. You should go ahead and listen to business stakeholders. You should co-create a new language in which you can communicate their concerns, and you make sure that they get it, or that they get IT. I would love to share experiences.
Well, thank you. That was, I enjoyed that talk. Questions? My question is, yes, visualization is a very good thing to do, but typically what kind of the problem with it is that you have to spend much more time to create something that you when you type you can do to pack a lot of information. So what are your I don't know recommendations about how to speed up this process?
Well, the first thing to note is that we are not only communicating visually by using pictures and diagrams, but we are still used to communicate with words, like in a document. So the visualization is like the second leg that you walk on. And as I've shown in a couple of examples, with a picture I can show you what I'm not able to tell you in 1,000 words. So also a picture is much more dense and communicates a lot more information in just one image. So
one more question?
Is it challenging to keep your real architecture and your business architecture in sync? Assuming the architecture is rapidly changed all the time.
So the question for those that didn't hear it is it challenging to keep the real architecture and the visual architecture in sync?
yeah, it is. You're right. Well, if architecture is about important things, as Mary Jo also said, the important things should not happen to change every month or 2 months. Well, sometimes they do, but not all the important points. So getting the things in sync should be a concern that you can spread about over a longer period of time. And you don't have to change your visualizations every month or 2 months. So we've got some very stable images that are on a wall in our team room for 7, 8 months.
So for those of you that are more research oriented, the research problem with this is identify classes of stakeholders. For those classes now define a standard type of visual language. Develop tools that will automatically do the kinds of overlays that we just heard about. And this is, 6-month project? Thank you again.